Okay, our first reading is James 1:17-27. Every generous act of giving with every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. In fulfillment of his own purposes, he gave us birth by the word of truth, so that we would become a kind of first fruits of his creatures. You must understand this, my beloved. Let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, for your anger does not produce God's righteousness. Therefore, rid yourselves of all sordidness and rank growth of wickedness, and welcome with meekness the implanted word that has power to save your souls. But be doers of the word, and not merely hearers who deceive themselves. For if any are hearers of the word and not doers, they are like those who look at themselves in a mirror. For they look at themselves, and on going away immediately forget what they were like. But those who look into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and persevere, being not hearers who forget, but doers who act, they will be blessed in their doing. If any think they are religious and do not bridle their tongues, but deceive their hearts, their religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to care for orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unsustained by the world, or unstained by the world.
Our gospel reading today is from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 7. It jumps around a little bit, verse 1 to 8, 14 to 15, and 21 to 23. I was tempted to just read the whole thing, but okay. Anyway. Now when the Pharisees and some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem gathered around him, they noticed that some of his disciples were eating with defiled hands, that is, without washing them. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they thoroughly wash their hands, thus observing the tradition of the elders. And they do not eat anything from the market unless they wash it. And there are also many other traditions that they observe, the washing of cups, pots, and bronze kettles. So the Pharisees and the scribes asked him, "Why do your disciples not live according to the tradition of the elders, but eat with defiled hands?" He said to them, "Isaiah prophesied rightly about you hypocrites. As it is written, 'This people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching human precepts as doctrines. You abandon the commandment of God and hold to human tradition.' Then he called the crowd again and said to them, 'Listen to me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing outside a person that by going in can defile, but the things that come out are what defile. For it is from within, from the human heart, that evil intentions come: fornication, theft, murder, adultery, avarice, wickedness, deceit, licentiousness, envy, slander, pride, folly. All of these evil things come from within, and they defile a person.'" May we hear and understand what we are learning today. The letter of James is often read as one of those prime pieces of wisdom in Christian literature. And James talks about living humbly and being open to the Spirit. He talks about, even though we're grounded in grace, that we need to act on that grace, and we need to do the things. We need to walk the talk as well as talking the talk. and we need to actually be who we say we are. Sometimes people challenge the authorship of James, but the more I research it, the more I am convinced that it is James, the brother of Jesus, who wrote this. Some skeptics say, no, that's hogwash, but I think that after most of the things I look at tell us that it's true. And then when they say, how can you believe all that Christianity stuff? It's a bunch of myths. How can you do that? And I look at James. Now, I admit I did not have any siblings. I was an only child. So I didn't deal with some of the things that people who have siblings deal with. But I look at this and I think, okay, this is Jesus' actual biological brother. This is the guy who could say, nah, he's just a guy, he took my toy hammer and then he got to drive the donkey cart before I did because he was older and, he was a spoiled kid. So I could see siblings, fighting or not really thinking so much. There's all those things about a prophet is honored everywhere except in their home. So when James, the brother of Jesus, became an apostle and a leader of the church, ending up losing his own life because of his firm belief in Jesus, I become even more convinced of what Jesus was teaching us when the guy's own little brother agrees with it. This part of James is such a beautiful and rich text, full of gifts and full of praise of God's goodness. Every generous act of giving and every perfect gift is from above. That's the NRSV, the one we read. The New International Version, which one of my friends says, now that is the infallible version. I think they're all somewhat fallible, but anyway, that one says, every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like the shifting shadows. I kind of like that, the shifting shadows. Even the Revised Standard Version is better than the New Revised Standard in terms of the Greek. It's translated, every good endowment and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. Another one, the CEB, Common English Bible, which I like in many ways, and then there's some things I look at it and I go, really? But anyway, this one is my favorite. So, every good gift, every perfect gift, comes from above. These gifts come down from the Father, the creator of heavenly lights, in whose character there is no change at all. So I like that one. But they're all a little bit different, you see? And that's why I go get out my Greek stuff and my Hebrew stuff, is because I want to see where it's really coming from. But there's lots of things to talk about here. God's lordship of the stars and the moon and the sun. God is the overall one of those. Many of the older pagan beliefs thought that each one of those was a separate God. Now each one has powerful influences on us. Right? But God is the one who is God over all. St. Francis's canticle, we say his prayer a little later today. This canticle that he wrote kind of understands how his intimate relationship with God forged this intimate bond with all of creation. Brother, sun, sister, moon comes from that. But the big thing about James is that he says all of these good things come from God. And only good comes from God, says James. He says evil doesn't come from God. Only good comes from God. Only love. There's an awful lot of people and ministers who are always being asked to explain why God does evil things. Why did God give us cancer? Why did God cause the car wreck? Why did God put me in this terrible marriage? It's all kind of trumped up in stupid, perilous theology. God doesn't do that. It's our own choices, or it's evil in the world that does that. God isn't moody. God isn't capricious. He doesn't change his character just because the moon has a cloud over it. That doesn't happen. There's a writer who keeps reiterating this thing. It says her name is Kate Bowler, and she wrote a book called "Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved." Everything happens for a reason. A lot of people say that. And I tend to counter it as, no, I don't think God sits up there and has a reason. Okay, I'm going to cause Virginia to hurt her leg so that she can get some rest. No. But God might say, Virginia's leg is hurting. I'm going to give her some comfort and some time to rest and some people who care about her. And I'm going to help her learn that she is not alone. Big difference, right? Big difference. So after all of that, Jesus' brother shifts into, instead of about God's words, in verse 19, he shifts into our words. This is one of the big messages of James. How do we reflect God's love and God's Spirit, as we've been discussing the last 3 weeks? How do we do that? How do we actually be that love? James helps us out a little bit by giving us some advice about holding our tongue. And I think maybe the church, both liberal and conservative churches, both those people that are right no matter what, even though I might not agree with them, and me, I think we all need, once in a while, one of these primers on Christian talk. How do Christians talk? How do Christians treat each other? What feelings do we nurse in our souls? We're told that anger is not of God. Hate is not of God. I had an interesting discussion about that yesterday, by the way. I might share a little later. It wasn't in my plan. But anger from us and hate that we experience becomes like a barbed wire barrier between us and God. It becomes that thing that separates us. It becomes that sin that we tell. What is sin? It becomes that separation from God. James says, be slow to speak. If we are being slow to speak, what might we be doing while we're not speaking? Thinking? Yep. What are you doing right now? You're not speaking, but you're listening. Yes. Being slow to speak might mean we listen. Not reckoning with what we're going to say next. Just really listening. Maybe even switching off our gadgets so we can be quick to hear others and help them. Verse 21 talks about putting away or ridding ourselves of all this junk. Junk being, let's go back. I don't want to say it wrong. Let's see. Doers of the word, not merely how to rid yourself of all sordidness and rank growth of wickedness. Welcome with meekness the implanted word that has the power to save your souls. Rid yourself of sordidness and wickedness. Ridding ourselves of that. The Greek word, apathemi. Yeah, apotheosis, apathemi. I don't speak Greek, I just read it. It literally means to take off your clothing. So if you have on some sort of a clothing of pretension, or anger, or hate or wickedness. It's time to shed that off. Kind of like when we have baptism. If we had a pool for baptism, we'd be taking off all the dirty clothes, putting on the white robes, getting immersed in that love of God. We change that. There's a story about a wealthy Hindu woman, talking about the clothes thing. A wealthy Hindu woman who came to Mother Teresa. Now, Mother Teresa, wore a white cotton sari with a blue stripe. Right? So this woman, during a conversation with Mother Teresa, admitted how much she loved the beautiful saris. In fact, she spent 800 rupees each month on a new one. Guess how much Mother Teresa's one cost? 8. So Mother Teresa, in trying to help this woman who seemed to have a hunger for God but was busy buying saris, wanted to help her. So she thought this was a good place to start. So she said to her, next time when you go to buy a sari, instead of buying it for 800 rupees, buy one for 500 rupees. And with the remaining 300, you buy saris for the poor people. So that was good. Of course, more than the shifting of money was at stake here. The elegance of those garments is a symbol of a woman's status, her notch in their caste system. But when the woman did it, over time, she got to the place where she was paying just 100 for hers and giving the rest away to the poor. At which point Mother Teresa said, please don't go below 100. So that's kind of a neat story of this woman's growth in how she was shifting her priorities, which is really what James is talking to us about. Yes, he's saying, be careful with your tongue, and it's very powerful. That's a different chapter. Be careful with it, right? But he's saying, put away this stuff. Focus on the gifts of God. James's letter kind of rankled Martin Luther, by the way. Martin Luther actually called James an epistle of straw. Now, I actually think straw has really important uses, like being in the manger where Jesus was laid. Just a lot. And for insulation and helping make bricks and things like that. But here's the thing. When James is talking about this justification by works, be doers of the word, not merely hearers, if there are hearers and not doers, he is not debunking Paul's stand about being saved by grace. He isn't. In fact, there's an even deeper agreement there between them. Because once we are saved by grace with Paul, then it is time to act on that grace and do something with it. There's not the one without the other. It's not either or. It's wonderful to have a dedication to good works. We look at former President Jimmy Carter, who shuns wealth and goes around working for Habitat for Humanity, helping build homes. He's been unrelentingly, if that's a word, unrelentingly, that's the word, dedicated to doing this sort of thing ever since he left the White House. He went back to the Peanuts in Plains, Georgia, and he's been working ever since. He makes courageous statements about human rights. He uses his tongue wisely. He even talks about the rights of women. And he talks about the rights of lesbians and gays. And he stands up for what he believes. I'm impressed with his work. And I'm impressed with people who look at that and follow his example. Paul says, by grace are we saved through faith. And he said in our last readings that faithfulness was the most fitting response to what God has done and is doing in our lives. God gives us these gifts. Faithfulness includes doing the work of God. includes being obedient to God. It's one of the big things about it. And James even says, where is that? The religion is worthless. If any think they are religious and do not bridle their tongues, they deceive their hearts, and their religion is worthless. We're supposed to care for orphans and widows. If people look at themselves in a mirror and forget who they are, if they look at the law of liberty and don't act on it, then they're becoming hearers who forget. What we want is to be hearers who are doers of the word. What we want is to accept that grace and that love and put it together with all that armor that we found out about last week and act on it. When James says that justification is by works, he doesn't have in mind all the works of self-reliance that compromise faith. What he has in mind is the works that we do as we act within God's Spirit and within God's love. I pulled myself up by my bootstraps things may be admirable. Sure, I worked and paid my way through college, yay me, right? But that's not the point. I couldn't have pulled myself up by my bootstraps or worked or found my way through college if I hadn't have had some help doing that. And if I hadn't had whatever God-given abilities I had. One of the ways I did was by serving churches as their music director. One of the ways I did it. So it all comes back to the beginning of James. And I still like the CEB. Every good gift, every perfect gift comes from above. These gifts come down from the Father, the creator of heavenly lights, in whose character there is no change at all. How can we be love? We can be loved by this old song I sang about being the hands and the feet and the eyes and the ears of God, about doing that work, wearing our belt and our sword and our breastplate and our helmet, and what else was there? A shield, right? All that stuff, and having it so that we can do the work of building community, of building God's kingdom. People don't like the word kingdom because it has patriarchy, but I think you know what I mean. Here, within us, within our little community, and within our bigger community. And the only way to do it, in the midst of all the hate and anger, is really to simply be love. Amen.